Welcome! It's been a long 2 months, and I've got nothing to share because I spent 2 months working on an intro for this video. The axles are pretty much done. I'll finish assembling them tomorrow. I think I'm going to have to go away for a week next week, so you probably won't see the video before then. But in terms of the work, it's pretty much done. There's quite a bit of faffing around shimming this junction in here. The shims are what govern the preload on the bearing at the bottom. So you get nice and tight steering, but not too tight, accurately measured with a fish scale. So as I said, the axles will be finished tomorrow. And the plan at the moment is I'm going to split them up into 2 videos. The main axle everything, and separately the freewheeling hubs. I thought I'd separate the freewheeling hubs because people who have nothing to do with Land Rovers may be looking for how freewheeling hubs work. So I'll do the hubs as a separate video. Got to keep things tidy for the camera. Just to be clear, I'll be releasing the videos to you guys on Patreon as soon as I have them edited. But I kind of thought as far as releasing them publicly is concerned, it would be more fun if they were sort of released more or less at the same time. Maybe a week apart. I think that's all I have to say about that. So on with the show.
Alright, let's make some lights. I'm going to be making up 3 pairs of fluorescent tubes, so each fitting will have 2 36 watt tubes in it. Those are your standard 1200 long tubes. In the front you can see some exquisitely fine woodworking, and 3 electronic ballasts. These ones come from the Far East of Europe. They're a little more expensive than the ones on eBay, but I can get them locally. I think they're about $35 each. And the tombstones, or end caps, and a bunch of wire. I'm using solid core wiring inside the fixtures themselves, and the cheapest way to get that, is to buy household 3-core wire. The electronic ballasts will have a wiring diagram on top, and the colours of the wires I'm using mean nothing, but obviously following the diagram, and I try and keep the colours in pairs if that makes sense. But you'll see in one of the fixtures I use red and black, and in the other one I use green and black. Yeah, so don't pay any attention to the colours. And for the actual power supply, I'm just cutting up an extension lead. Because in the world we live in, it's a lot cheaper to buy a pre-made 15-meter extension lead than to just go and buy the amount of wire you need. And the extension lead is multi-strand wiring, so I'm just soldering the ends so they push into the clip connectors. And normally you'd earth the body of the fixture itself, but since we have an MDF fixture, there's really not that much chance of electrocuting yourself. I may as well attach the earth to the body of the ballast anyway. But that isn't going to save you if you go sticking your fingers into the tombstones at the end. So if you ever visit me, don't go sticking your fingers in my lights. And so I'm wiring up 3 lights on one circuit. So the intermediate 2 lights, I'm splicing the wires together. And all of this is going into a power socket, well actually through a multi-board that I can turn on and off. So don't worry, none of this dodgy wiring is being wired into the house permanently. And the tombstones at the end. You can see they also have the convenient push type connectors. All of these tombstones are designed to work around a proprietary clip-in system of some sort, which obviously my exquisite MDF carcass doesn't have. So I'm just driving a screw through them. And here I'm setting one of the tubes in place, just to get the length exact. And testing the fit. I want there to be a little bit of outwards pressure on the tombstones, which there is, so that's good. So that's it. Now we have functional lights. But being the true professional I am, I did cable tie everything, and I'm going to drizzle some hot snot around the place. And now the important part, the tubes that go into the fitting. These are 5500 Kelvin 98 CRI tubes. CRI being a score out of 100, which basically is a measure of how fully the light source fills out the natural light spectrum. All the colours of the rainbow represented equally. And 98 CRI is really good. These are the types of tubes you would see in a gallery or an art space, or anywhere colour's important. These are a really good quality light source, better than you can currently get in LED strips, which is why I'm still using fluorescents. And they're cheap. I don't think I mentioned it yet, but these 3 fittings are in addition to the 5 fittings I already have. These 3 are basically going over the part of the garage where the car would park. Up until now I've lived without lighting over here because I do most of my filming at the workbench. But with the Land Rover and stuff going on, I kind of wanted better lighting throughout. Alright, first test, and this is legit, I hadn't turned them on before I filmed this part. Let's see if they work. Oh yeah, that's some sweet lighting. So here you can see the difference. At the moment I have all of the other lights on, and here come the new lights. Boom, much better. And over the pantograph, before, after. And this is the area where I will be reassembling the differentials. for the upcoming Land Rover videos. Before, after. Here you can see I do have natural light coming in, but all of the light circuits are currently off, and I'm going to turn them on one by one. In total there's 8 fixtures, so 12 tubes lighting the room. Anyway, the point of this video was just that I wanted to show you that for not much money you can make light fittings that output a really high quality light. Good enough for art galleries, so probably good enough for your garage. As of 2019, LED strips are not quite there. I have seen some high CRI LED strips advertised on eBay, but completely unbranded, and I have no idea if that's trustworthy or not. I'm sure LEDs will get there. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent again. On to the next segment. Look at them all walking out of the forest. Where have you been, mate? Oh, so you want my opinion about the new Defender? Well, too bad. You're getting it anyway. Look at Ricardo waffling on about the stupid centre jump seat. He may as well be holding the cheque from Land Rover in his other hand. In 2019, who wants a centre middle seat? Especially one that clearly doesn't fit the car. Like, who do they think's going to sit in it? It's not 1950 anymore. Children have to be strapped into child seats. Are you telling me that Land Rover thinks teenagers and grown adults are going to sit in the middle between two other adults? That'll be cozy with your mate Barry. Clearly Land Rover haven't set out to build one of these, and I don't think anyone expected them to. So am I disappointed? Well, I am, but not for the reason you might think. They gave us another Range Rover, which was just what everybody expected. Giving up on the idea that they may actually make another Defender, you know, not just by name, but a real utilitarian vehicle.
Off and on road. The characterful design of the LED headlights provides undoubted modernity. Solid shoulders and powerful squared-off wheel arches communicate the vehicle's purposeful stance.
What I thought would have been cool is if Land Rover went way out there and did something really different. Maybe the first all-electric genuine off-roader. Now that would have been interesting. They claim to be leaders, the best 4x4 by far. Why didn't you do something exciting? And really, I have nothing much to say about the new Defender. It's probably the best vehicle in Land Rover's lineup. I mean, no one's buying this fugly thing. Here are some bolts I plated yesterday. These are old bolts and they're not going in a particularly critical location, so I'm not too concerned about the finish. But I want to kind of get it better for the sake of other pieces to come. Now you can probably see, if I get as close as I can while staying in focus, that the finish is patchy. Now I think there are two problems going on here. I think the more silver areas are where the passivation hasn't taken to the zinc. And the more yellow areas are supposed to be blue passivate, which is somehow yellow tinted. Here, let me show you what I'm talking about. So I've got 4 buckets here. This is the passivation area. So over here I zinc plate the bolts. They come out, they are nicely zinc plated, and that part of the process is finished. And you can leave them like that if you want. But normally you passivate, which is basically putting a clear coating on top of the zinc. And that's what these 4 buckets here are about. Over the back here we have some acid. I'm not sure what acid it is, it's just whatever they sent.
They of course try and hide the fact it's acid by calling it, what do they call it? Metexit. Sweet name. Anyway, I think it's probably nitric acid. So the zinc plated bits get dunked in here, that etches the zinc surface. Then the acid needs to be rinsed off in this water here. Then they go into the blue dip, and the blue passivate is supposed to stick to the zinc. And then you rinse the blue dip off and hang the parts to dry. Sorry, rinse the excess blue dip off and hang the parts to dry. The water in number 4 has to be perfectly clean. Any contamination will show up on here, because what happens is the water sits on here until it dries, and the slightest bit of contamination in that water seems to affect how the blue passivate appears on the part. And the way I normally do it is the parts get dunked in here at the very end, shaken to rinse the excess off, and then left to dry. I think I'm going to repassivate these parts and try and blow the air off with an air gun. See if that helps. I'm not going to worry about the yellowing yet. I think I know what's caused that. But just for this batch, I want to try and get a more even coating.
Here I'm dipping the bolts into the unnamed acid. And as you can see, it strips the old passivate off almost instantly. Which is great, because once the bolts are zinc plated, you can play around with the passivating over and over again. And off camera I rinsed the bolts in a second tier bucket of distilled water. And now here I am rinsing them properly. You want to get 100% of everything off the bolts. Perfectly clean. And then they go into the blue passivate for about 10 seconds. And then out, straight into the clean water. There is a tiny tint of yellow, but like I said, I think I know the reason why, and that's because there's kind of like an infection in the water that the passivate was mixed into. And I'll blow all the excess water off with the air gun. At a pretty low pressure, I think about 1 bar. I don't need to send these bolts flying over to the other side of the room. I have some more blue concentrate, so I'll mix some more later, when I get to a more critical project. But for now, I'm pretty happy with these results. Plenty good enough to go underneath a Land Rover anyway. Okay, so real quick, I did have a problem with an infection in the blue passivate. I should be able to leave the bolts in there for a little longer and them not turn yellow. So everything you've just seen still applies, but I mixed up a new batch of blue passivate. And now it's nice and blue, and I can leave the parts in there for a good 15 seconds, rinse them, blow them off, no yellow. In fact, the parts now look pretty much as good as commercial zinc plated parts you'd buy from the hardware store. Now I'm not saying that the protection is the same or the equivalent, because I have no way of controlling the exact thickness of zinc that's getting plated on the parts or anything like that. But they are zinc plated, and in terms of appearance they look pretty much as good as commercial bolts. So I'm happy. I need a thumbnail photo for the axle rebuild video. You can see here if I get some of this crap out of the way. I'm going for something like a disassembled overhead shot. The white rags in the corner are roughly the corner of the frame. As I'm laying everything out, I kind of want the edges to be solid, so I'm putting the big chunky pieces on the edge, and I think the frame will cut through the brake drums you can see here, and possibly the axle at the top. I'm not sure. As I'm recording this voiceover, I haven't actually edited the image yet. Other than that, I don't really have a plan here. I'm just putting the big bits out and then filling in the gaps. I think this is looking pretty good so far. From directly overhead, it'll hopefully look more geometric with all the circles and things being accurate. I need to leave 2 gaps for the legs of the ladder, so I can actually operate the camera once this is all set up. Okay, so I haven't finished all the detail yet, but let's fire off the first test shot just to see if this is going anywhere. Yeah, that looks okay. I think this is going to work. I'm going to make some adjustments because I don't really want parts overlapping in the image. At least not the big bits. Okay, that's looking pretty good, I think. I think this is going to be good. A few more fine adjustments of the big bits, and I'm working around the ladder because I know I'm going to have to put the ladder back in for the final shot, so I want to know that it's not going to knock everything over. But it is a pain. And now to start filling in some of the gaps with smaller parts. I just realised I forgot about the swivel pins. These are kind of the stars of the show, so I've got to fit them in somewhere. And now for the little bits and pieces. I kind of want the image to be full, but everything spaced out. I don't want anything overlapping. And I really wish I had a better backdrop. I wish the floor was textured, but not this horrible pinky brown colour. I might try and dull that down later for the final image in Photoshop. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd really prefer a nicer backdrop, but I don't have one. If you remember back to the Myford restoration, I did a similar thing for the final video, laid out on a white piece of MDF. But I've since cut that MDF up and used it for all sorts of things. Actually, I used it for the light fittings you've already seen in this video. And here's the situation. Let's fire off another frame and see how that looks. Yeah, cool. I think this is going to be awesome. I don't know if it's going to make a good thumbnail image for YouTube, but I think it's going to make a cool photo anyway. Okay, so let's talk lighting. Right now, I've got all of the lights on, and we've got light coming in from the far side of the garage. Now, because we are taking the photo from directly overhead, my first thought is that I don't want the lights on directly above the image, otherwise it's going to flatten everything out. I kind of want the light to be coming from the side, and that will make all of the curved surfaces look much more curved. So here you can see the lights above us are turned off. I've got the lights at the far side left on, may as well, and the light coming in through the garage. Okay, let's see how that looks with all of the lighting directly above us turned off. It looks okay. After editing, it'll probably look more like this. But looking at it, I really want the objects on the floor to stand out more from the floor. I want to hide the floor as much as possible. And I'm looking at this image and I can see that I've lost the reflections in the silver pieces. So the silver pieces are kind of more or less the same tone as the floor. So this isn't going to work. So instead I'll try the opposite. I've got all of the lights turned off except for the lights directly above us. And obviously we've still got plenty of ambient light coming in, so I'm not worried about completely flattening the image. Let's see how that looks. Oh, and if you're wondering how I'm taking these photos without having my feet and legs on the ladder, I'm using this nifty little remote. Yeah, okay, that's much better. Ideally I'd want a bit more drama in terms of side lighting, but I think we're going to have to settle for this. You can see I've really got the flat silver pieces popping out. That's what I want. I don't like the way that this brake drum is reflecting so much light, but I'm not going to rearrange everything. I'll just try and deal with that later in Photoshop if it still bothers me. Okay, so now that I'm close, I put a little more time into making sure the camera's focused properly and things like that. And we'll also take the first shot without the ladder in the way. Okay, it's starting to look pretty decent. There's still a few things that overlap and a few uneven gaps and things like that. So I'll sort all of that out, and we're getting pretty close to the final image, I think. Alright, that should be it. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. Now the first thing I'm going to do is straighten this out. And then crop the waste away. You can see I've left plenty of space around the photo for now. The resolution we have here is way more than we need for a thumbnail, so I zoomed out to give me plenty of space to work in from there. Our final crop will be 16 by 9, something more like this. I'll undo that crop for now because I may as well do all of the other adjustments on the full-sized image and just crop it at the end. Okay, I think it actually looks pretty good as it is. I do want to pull some of the saturation out though. Everything in the image is black and silver, except really for the hammer. I mean, mostly I want to pull the saturation out of the floor, maybe not that much. Something like that. So basically what I've done here is if we turn on our masks, you can see I've basically painted over the hammer so far as the saturation adjustment is concerned. So the adjustments won't have any effect on the area that's painted out. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now the only thing left to do is decide on the crop. Yeah, okay. Well, I think that's it. I'm happy with that. I won't go through the whole process of putting the text on, but in the next image you'll see the final version with the title and everything on it. And there you go. Well, I think that'll do. I'm 75% happy with that. I never know with thumbnails. People say it makes a huge difference. I'm not so convinced. I think yes, if you have a professional looking thumbnail, like somebody cared, it makes a big difference. But once you're in that category, I think people read too much into it. What am I talking about? The last thing you guys care about is some other jackass's uneducated guesses at how YouTube works. So let's just wrap this up here. Oh, if any of you guys have Instagram pages or YouTube channels, send me a message and I'll give you a shout out next month. Other than that, thanks for hanging out, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.